Okay, everybody, good morning again. You've heard my name several times, and hopefully I can live up to the hype. I'm Ren Price. Actually, I came into the Army as a medical researcher, and then I switched over to the Army-Baylor program because I figured everybody gets promoted. We all have to deal with HR, with finances, all that stuff, and it was free education. Although I swore in 1999, yes, I've had my PhD for 20 years. I swore that I was done with education. I thought it's free, I'm getting paid to do it, so why not go? So I came in and actually switched to healthcare administration as a 70 Alpha in the Army. And I've been doing that. In fact, I was at Launch School before Colonel Bain, and so that's where I did my residency and then spent some time there and at ERMC in Europe, then over to Fort Bliss, and then I was able to, and blessed to be able to come back here. So I've been here for 2 years, and what I'm hoping to do is share with you not just the slides or the concept, because we were introduced to the bear, but share with you hopefully a different viewpoint of a couple of things and how I've come to see these things. Let me ask you a quick question because I know we had names. So how many of you have actually precepted one of our students/residents before? Raise high hands. Okay. So then a few of you haven't. Okay, so some of these things are familiar for some of you, not for others, so hopefully I can introduce them. Despite what Commander Towers said, I'm not going into super detail on the bear and things like that. We're going to do that with an activity, actually. Lorena will lead us for the second part of this. What I'd like to do is sort of make that bridge from what we've been talking about and then what Colonel Peacock introduced from the Army. One of the things, if you're sitting out here and you're sitting in a civilian facility and you think, well, that's great, that's a nice way that the Army is dealing with their enlisted training and their Army officers. But as I'm reminded from Commander Towers and Colonel Gilson and all of these folks, they say, we're not Army. Hey, we've got, in fact, this morning, was it this morning or tomorrow morning, there's an 0430 run for the Army birthday. So we're dragging our brand new students, and the Navy and Air Force and Coast Guard people are like, yeah, I'll meet you at 9 o'clock in the classroom. So if you don't have an Army officer, the ICTL concept, I don't want to say just disregard, but don't let it keep you up at night. However, what I'm hoping to do is share with you how we can better utilize what we do have to actually help Colonel Peacock, to help you as preceptors, but ultimately to help the residents then be the best that they can in the short period of time that we have them, and at least get them on the trajectory where they're running. You remember, in fact, so this dates me tremendously. You remember Mary Lou Retton? Some of you may not have been alive. You know, back in the Olympics, she did such a great job, and she still looks great, right? Anyway, I think we're about the same age. But I just remember her like powering down when she was doing that pommel horse thing, running down that thing as hard and fast as she can. And boy, she'd hit that springboard and come off of that and flip over that thing and do all those miraculous things and land. And so we're not talking about the landing. When we talk about the GEMC things, and we're talking about those competencies, those are the landing. What do you do when, well, or that's actually Mary Lou Retton. But when you're starting out, we're talking about running down that runway, getting to the springboard, and hopefully not just plowing into the pommel horse, but getting in that good trajectory to actually be going to the good place. You can eventually hit that landing. Why did I go into this? I feel a little passionate about this. I have a daughter who just graduated from high school. In fact, number 5 child. Let me throw that out there. Just graduated from high school. She, bless her heart, is not, well, the first 4 are out and about doing various things, including my second son. I just have to throw this out here, who is married. His wife is taking her microbiology exam tomorrow to finish her first year of medical school in San Diego. My son was just recently, he's a year behind, but he was recently accepted there, San Diego, and she's also expecting in October. So yay for me and the grandbaby. I'll just throw that out there. Yay for them. They're going to be very busy, but they also, I was just telling the guys this morning, they each got, because of the dependent, they each got a $35,000 grant for tuition, and tuition is $40,000, so it's like that baby is paying off simply by being a dependent. So everybody, all the naysayers who said they won't get into the same school and they certainly shouldn't have kids, I'm saying that's where the cash is and they'll get their education. Anyway, that said, my daughter who just graduated is not on that trajectory. My daughter doesn't even know what she wants to do when she wakes up in the morning. So so she's applying for jobs. My wife is a little harder on the girls. So she's been after us like, okay, how many jobs have you applied today? And Catherine's just freaking out. She's telling me, I'm applying on cruise ships. I'm doing that. I'm like, sweetheart, do not leave the local area, please. Your dad still needs you. But she doesn't know what to do. And so how do we help her and how does she develop that? We're not in that same position. We know what we want to do with our curriculum. When people come to the Army-Baylor program, they may not know specifically what they're going to be doing, but they've heard about it, say, I've heard some good things. I came in because a guy The year previous to me, he was filling out his application, and he was at Institute of Surgical Research where I was working. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm applying to the Army-Baylor program. It's like, oh, what is that? So it was right over here. I was thinking it's a Baylor. It's not a Baylor. It's on Fort Sam. And so that started this, okay, let me go. Like I said, I wanted to know the finance, the HR, those sorts of things. My intent was not to become a healthcare administrator necessarily, but it changed things for me. So view-wise, I'm hoping to change a few things. I've talked about a lot of things. Kids in medical school, kids just out of high school not knowing what they may want to do. But how can we best help now our students who have, when you're getting them, have been through a year of this. They have a pretty good idea of a smattering of a lot of things, right? And they're coming in. Some of them are physicians. We have some O5s. We have some O2s. So it's your second lieutenants, so new. So there's this whole gamut of experience and exposure to the healthcare world. Some of you will be getting students who have never set foot in a healthcare facility except as a patient. But so now they're getting what we have taught them and tried to get them to understand as much as we can in a classroom and a few tours around town. Thank you, Colonel Parker, if you've helped any of those tours or anything like that. But as we're moving forward, so you're going to get this. And what do we try to do? So in the first year, we try to get them at least a common framework of thinking. They're exposed to certain things. And so they can come out and at least look back on some project or something that they can, if you say, hey, I need you to do an analysis, a business case analysis, which I argue most of us misuse that term. Actually, we don't really do them rigorously. We can do that a little bit better. But that's what you're doing. How do we get these people with these experiences, give them enough so they can be running down that runway to come out the front? So originally, this section was just called the bear. That's great. What I've come to understand over the last couple of years is when we're talking about competency-based education, I'm not calling out the program in and of itself. We're talking about competencies, but I think we can go just one level deeper. And that's what I'd like to share, is just a way to think about this that will make the bear not just something that your resident will come to you and say, hey, can you sign this? Or when they show up and you get them to say, hey, what is this? It's like, I don't know, it's a spreadsheet and I don't really know what's going on. But something that we can introduce our students to when we first get them, that they will understand to be one of these things, ultimately to be sort of what Colonel Peacock was talking about, a document that captures their assessments over these 2 years. It's not for the didactic year only, it's not for the residency year only. It's for, that essentially is a summary of both of those years and the experiences, and we'll talk about those. So why I say this and why am I going through this? I'm viewing my time with you, this precious time, as I want to be a little bit of a tour guide. Has anybody been to the Natural Bridge Caverns out up towards New Braunfels? A couple of you? So if have you ever been on a cave tour, anywhere, any cave, where you've had somebody guide you through the cave? No? Yeah, don't touch. I say don't touch. One of the things at the Natural Bridge Caverns, and I say this to the students in my classes too when I get them in there, is a lot of times, because you can read the books, you can read the manual, but what I'd like to do is like the tour guide did for us when I went through there years ago. It's much too expensive, by the way. They've got zip lines and all other things, so if you want to go, it's $30 a head. I'm not taking everybody back. But anyway, when you go through, the tour guide walks through and she'll describe different things. This has been here for a gazillion years, and this pile of bat guano is here, but it's still fresh, although it's sealed because there's no way for it to go away. But one of the things that sort of struck me one day on this tour, she had a flashlight and she'd point out different things. And at one point she said, do you know the Disney castle that's at the beginning of every Disney movie? And it used to be, did anybody watch The Wonderful World of Disney on Saturday evenings after bath time? Okay, so that castle that we've all known and grown to love, she says, look, it's right here in the cave. And she turns and she points her flashlight clear across the cavern on this little stack of rocks, right? So these stalagmites, they might reach the ceiling, so remember that. And, by golly, it was the Disney castle. Well, it wasn't, and it wasn't exactly, but she had suggested that, and so it came to my mind. Two different things. Pharmacology, actually, I won't go into that. The Disney castle. What I'd like to do is just present a way of thinking about this that I've come to understand and appreciate to then help you. So it's not just, how is this a tool for your resident, for you, and then ultimately, because what we need to do, as the question came up, hey, is the Army-Baylor program relevant and will it stay relevant? We don't know, but getting to that end, the bear actually, we do want to be able to use that and collect data from that, and we have in the past. So I want to describe a couple things, why that's significant, but I think thanks Colonel Peacock because she set that up. This really fits along those lines. A lot of it is self-assessment, but hopefully as we're talking with and working with the residents and the students, we're explaining what these things mean. And the things when we're talking about competencies are not individual tasks. The PA program here, we had a graduate research day just a handful of weeks ago. We were just over here. And one of the sessions they invited, thank goodness it helped round out a couple of things, some of the folks, the administrators of the physician assistant program here. And they're going on a training and they're doing competency-based stuff. So their tasks, they're pretty straightforward. They say, what do residents, after they do their didactic, what do we want residents to be able to do on that first day? And they've got a pretty specific list. We want them to be able to take a patient history. We want them to be able to do this and that and the other. Healthcare administration is not so succinct. It would be nice sometimes if there was a checklist. This isn't quite a checklist, but it's the concepts that we're getting at, and that's what we want to talk about just a little bit. Lorena's like, okay, go on, you're not even on the first slide. That's essentially, if you've got any of this, this was what I wanted to share. And I'll walk through and hopefully point at a couple of Disney castles to help you think about this a little differently and to be able to use this. Okay, Commander Towers brought up this CAMI accreditation. I just want to launch off of this. Why do we want to be accredited? Yeah, actually, for nothing else, Colonel Peacock did mention that that's one of the high-risk things with our programs, is they're looking at this. Are you accredited, and can we maintain that accreditation? Well, why? Most of you are familiar with Joint Commission, right? So why do we even do that? In the military, we don't have to, strictly speaking. However, we want to align ourselves broadly with a named body, with something that's recognized for quality and for doing that. And so that's what we wouldn't have to get this CAMI accreditation, but we do for certain reasons. And as he also pointed out, as we've been the leading edge, so maybe we've had a hand, maybe the program has had a hand in outlining these things, but what is it that they require for accreditation? What do they want us to meet? And so it's almost the cart, the chicken and the egg, which came first here? I don't know, but at this point, the chicken is, we may have been the chicken, but we're following this. What I want to do is highlight where these come in and where the bear fits in as part of this process. So a couple of the things, a couple of sets that came out funny. I just wanted to point this out, a lot of words. One of the criteria, in fact, the very first one for curriculum design is that we will adopt a set of competencies that aligns with the program's mission and types of jobs that graduates are about to enter. That's why we adopted the GMSI core curriculum. Simply for that, we want to align, and it's pretty straightforward. Okay? And we know that at least in the military, that's what we're looking for. The committee meets every 3 years to get together and say, what are the most relevant things today? Do these competencies, as we're addressing them, address what senior executives in the MHA, the Military Health System, MHS, what they're looking for. And so when we've adopted that, so the CAMI says, do you use those competencies as the basis of your curriculum? So depending on your, do you build your courses on that? Do you base your learning activities and things like that? And then do you follow that? And then a key thing is, so this assessment methods. We'll talk about that. Okay, the second part. So our curriculum will facilitate a depth and breadth of knowledge of healthcare sector and healthcare management. We do that. But what we want to do is we need to document that to show that. And so we're getting to that again and show that this is aligned. So there are several. We're not the only ones in DHA who use this or have adopted this core curriculum. I just wanted to point this out here for that. So one of the key ones, one of the major ones, because we've got the longest program and we're the ones who are spinning out the actual healthcare administrators. So you're familiar with this. Commander Towers threw this up again. This is just the words on the table. So this is the front cover, which Lorena does post or send out. And so I'm not going to go into the details here, but please look at this. And why I'm going to say this, because there is, in the evolution of the bear, so you've seen a couple of screenshots, for those of you who are familiar with it, it's an Excel workbook. And in there are several tabs. So we have, thanks to our brand new PA IT expert, who's all excited and do all sorts of magic, Major Larson, we are evolving that bear to be a little more user-friendly. And one of the key things, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, is when we talk about competencies, we generally are talking about the high-level things. But I'll throw this out here. For example, finance. Well, finance is a noun. It's not a competency. What really the meat of the issue is what's underneath that is known as the behaviors. And those are found in this manual on those pages that Commander Towers flipped through. What Major Larson is helping us do is put those in there so they're very easily accessible within the bear. So you won't see this. You might send it out, but your residents coming out, so this is just a taste for the future. They have the old bear or the current bear that doesn't have that, so you still need to refer to this book. But the new one, it is magic, I've seen it this far. You'll be able to click on a competency and you can go to a tab that actually lists the different behaviors. Those start with verbs. And that's what I want to underline, and that's if I could point on the Disney castle, that's where I'd like to direct your attention. There are several, I don't think there are more than 10 under each competency, but if you take 36 competencies, and then they range from 4 to 10 behaviors, well, how do you do that? So that's 36 times 10, 360 behaviors. But you'll see as you look through there, and I'll bring this up, we don't need to necessarily address each one, and we certainly can't in the courses. But what we were trying to do is hit key ones. Again, these are the competencies for senior executives, but from the outset, what can we as instructors, how can we build our courses with the right experiences, the right projects, the right assessments to get them along the way and then hand them off, and then it gets to you. Then what can you do with them? Where can you direct them and point them so they can further build on those competencies? And the bear is the way we track those. Here's a nice little graphic. Looks a little different, but you'll see, you need to go through here. Each of us can read. But of these are the domains under which fall then the 37 different, there's magic. So what I want to do is just point out one, for example. So we'll talk about leadership and organizational management, just briefly. As I mentioned, this is the domain. So when you're looking, when you say, hey, there are 7, that's where the number 7 comes from, is heptagon. Under this, there are these 6 competencies. Again, you'll notice none of these is a verb. But all of these, I can guarantee you, if we went around the room and I said, I asked anybody, Colonel Peacock, what does leadership mean? And are you teaching that? What would you say?
As a preceptor or as an instructor?
Either way.
I would say in the didactic role, it's hard for me to, I can teach a concept of leadership, but I can't ensure that they demonstrate it.
Okay. But so then what concept are you teaching? If I had more time, we'd go through there. So that'd be, but are we all doing the same thing? I'd say not. One of the things, even amongst the faculty, we can bring up or high reliability. I'd throw that out there. Everybody said, oh yeah, I've heard of that. But probably to understand what that means to each one of you, how you might define it would be completely different. That's where then the behaviors come in. A lot of words just said, this happens to just have one of the fewest. So this is decision making. So the competency decision making, the noun, is associated with, and it says, hey, it's a process. It describes it a little bit. Sorry, I'm not supposed to get in front of the screen, but I'm pointing. I suppose I can do this. Talks about that, and then it says, senior leaders must demonstrate the following behaviors at the application level. And then it lists those. Identify, prioritize, and analyze a problem or issue. Some of them are reasonably broad, things that we do almost on a daily basis. But not all of our students can do that to a high degree. So this one's pretty simple. But so I'm saying this now, not in terms of the bear. This is the approach that we take. These are the targets that we're trying to hit. Somebody brought up, well, are we teaching to the test if we point you as preceptors to these, or if we look at these as instructors? I'd say no. When you look at the GEMC book, it actually talks about those. It says these are left generally, not to be redundant, general. I don't want to say vague. That gives the wrong impression. They're general enough that you do have leeway in there. But what these behaviors do is they point out, it's a specific common framework that we can all use. So please, each of you, you'll even go away from this talk with a different concept. We're not all seeing the Disney castle the same way, but please be at least somewhat familiar with those behaviors. And then when we're talking about doing things like identifying projects that will target places where perhaps our residents are not so strong, or we can utilize them where they are strong, we can build off of those, okay, and build on those. So does that make sense? I think this is that next level. We haven't really been, at least in mine, so I'll just say that I'm the N of 1. I was not initially thinking of this that way. I was up here, but then my big thing is like, we're not all doing the same thing. How do we know? It still doesn't guarantee, but those behaviors are really the targets we're going for. So this is a key thing. Teaching, learning, and methods, this is another of the criteria, will be based on taxonomic levels. And then we'll provide opportunities through team-based activities and go through several different things. Here's the key thing, and this is where the residency year comes in. Sorry, it's a lot of words. But this is for them to gain an understanding of and interact with a variety of healthcare professionals and organizations. We're doing that. They have field trips and different things during the didactic year, but if they're with you, especially if you're in one of the now soon to be formerly eMISMs or something like that. Or if you're at the VA, or both ways, if you have a local VA, those experiences all help build this and is part of the program. But then how do we document that and make sure that we're coming back? Not every resident will have the same experiences, but the experiences the residents do have, if we can capture that and document that, it's so much the better for them and for us. Then are we including integrative experiences, including field-based applications? That's why you're here. That's why you're doing what we're asking you to do. Okay. Last thing I want to point out from here is, do we incorporate, it says we will incorporate a range of assessment methods. So we do that through our classwork, through our projects, through our exams, through reports, through written communication. We'll talk about a little bit more. But then looking at these taxonomic levels, we've been talking a lot about knowledge level versus application. But that's where we're getting at. Not to hit this target or teach to the test, but really this gives us the common framework. Okay. And then we will regularly evaluate the extent to which each student attains the competency. If we don't understand what the competencies, or in this case behaviors, are, how can we assess them on that? And so that's what we'd like to do now, and that's why the next evolution of the bear will help us get there. It won't be so difficult to go look up the behaviors. We'll just be able to see that. Okay. Commander Tyler, I keep going to Commander Towers, just talked about these. Again, a lot of words, but this should help as well. Expert, here's one thing. Here's a shout out to Lorena. None of our students coming out of here should be expert in anything, right? And actually, if you read this, the one on here is writes publication quality articles and field of experience. So if you have a resident and they show up and they've got 8s, 9s, and 10s all over their bear after this first year, ask them pointed questions. And maybe they are experts and we have failed to recognize that. But we're really working in these levels. Ideally, it's a master's program. It's a practitioner program. So at the end of the 2 years, we should be predominantly in that application level. Okay, we showed this. There are just a couple of things. Just wanted to point out here. You cannot see this, but in the roadmap, how do we integrate this? Ensure faculty buy-in. This is part of what I'm doing this here. Can we buy in just a little bit more with a little bit more understanding? Then how do we assess these things? One of the key things, sorry, I'm blocking it off, is develop tracking tools to do this. However we're assessing, are we tracking it? And that's where then the bear comes in. And that's what on the poster you didn't see, a couple of screenshots, and Lorena's going to walk us through that in a little bit more. So a couple things, where do these come up? During the didactic year, the students are introduced to the bear at the very beginning. And admittedly, as a faculty advisor, not understanding the way I do now or feeling about it the way I do now, I didn't quite get what the bear is. Like, did you fill out your bear? Did you feel good about it? Yeah. Well, now it should be very different. Now, as an instructor, I'm setting up my course, I should have the targeted behaviors, competencies and behaviors in that course. How do I address that? I personally am a big fan of case studies because it does a lot more than it gets them more into things than just a multiple choice exam. But so when I build that up, which behaviors am I targeting and what can I do with that? But when they first come in, we actually, the very first time, we give them a version of the GEMC exam. It's a 185 question test. We sit down. They may or may not know anything about it. They get that again at the end of the year and again at the end of the residency year. So if any of you have a resident now that's just getting ready to graduate, they're supposed to be taking this again during this time frame at some point in time. They do a self-assessment. They walk through the bear. But until we point them out, they're not going to look at those behaviors. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping to emphasize now with our new students, because your residents that you're getting, we've not had that same emphasis. So you might ask them about the behaviors, but they might say, oh, I don't really remember that. Next year, hopefully we'll have that better teed up for you. They do a self-assessment at the end of every quarter for each class. You know, do I know health law better than I did before? And they do that. But also under health law, there are several behaviors. In fact, Dr. Zucker was just asking me via emails, okay, where am I supposed to be looking at? And she's covering most of them, rest assured, ma'am. But anyway, but are we doing that and how they feel about that? So then they take the GEMC exam again. In fact, our didactic year just did it last week, the week before. And then we've got the oral board exam, which then many of you are helping us tomorrow. So that is part of the ramp, halfway down halfway down the carpet, running to that pommel horse, then you get them. So you get them and you'll have their scores from the exam that they took a couple of weeks ago. So we still have to put those into the bear. And then, what do they do with it there? Strongly recommend, Commander Towers pointed out there, he said, look at their bear. Ask them for their bear. And as we go through the next part with Lorena, she will point out how some key questions and a good place for you to start, especially if you're new and you haven't done this, at least how to get that conversation going. but hopefully you can involve them more with the bear. Again, not as a thing in and of itself. I'm running out of time. I just wanted to, if anybody's familiar with Boy Scouts, which is now Scouts, BSA, I want to bring this in very quickly, Sarah Lorena. I'm also looking at it, so the bear is not the manual. The GEMC thing is more or less the manual that says this, but if you've done Scouts, the first part of this is actually great. You can learn knots, you remind yourself of knots, camping, first aid, all this stuff. But at the back, it actually has their different ranks in Scouting. And it's a record. And you say, so-and-so completed this, did this, earned this merit badge, and you list that in there. The bear is essentially that. The first part is the didactic, the experiences that we're doing. This is everything that we're giving them. Well, hopefully. This is the knowledge. You're helping them build the experience. But the bear is that crucial. They're not graded on the bear, but especially as we go forward, we are collecting those data. And the bear will be web-based, in fact, very soon. So it won't even be Excel. And so we'll be able to, in fact, Major Larson is doing it now in the Excel spreadsheet. We'll be able to actually pull those data off of those individual bears. But when it's web-based, we'll be able to do that and be a little more rigorous in our reporting of that, and hopefully defining, better defining and describing our assessment and refining how we assess and how we document that. So think of it like that if you want, or some other book if you got out there. The bear is writing down and making sure it's written down what they've done to signal that to the next part. Because also the Eagle Scouts, you get your Eagle Scout approved, you come up before a 3-person board and they have to approve it. So it's that sort of thing. And you as preceptors will sign the thing. It says, yes, I'm confident that this person has attained an appropriate level of competency. Okay, they'll take the GEMC exam again. And this is where, then it says right here at the end, the preceptor assesses their competencies. Well, hopefully you've got some idea, or you will have some idea throughout the year, and you'll be able to pick that up. You'll see where strengths are. It's fairly obvious, our more forward-leaning students. Some of them may be a little quieter. It may not be so obvious, but at least you know what we're looking at and what the targets are in that framework. Okay. So essentially, I've described this. The key thing here that we want to, because we do see it, they submit it once a quarter on Canvas, and then we get to, and as advisors, we open that up and look at it, but we'll do that and hopefully be looking at it a little more rigorously to help them. Not as the assessment in and of themselves, but to walk through the assessment and help them see. So were you able, you say, hey, first quarter, I saw that you wanted to target your, I don't know, something, your change management, and you were tasked with this project. How did that go? Do you feel, looking at those behaviors, do you feel that you accomplished your goals? And so we'll be able to, on all 3 sides, there aren't 3 sides, on the points of the triangle, hopefully be able to manage and produce graduates who work. So this is actually just one of the screenshots in there. It's 3D, not everybody likes these. But you see the competency, and these are at the competency level. They're not down at the very behavioral level, but we're working on that. So living document, please use it with that. It's not just an addendum. We want to make it more significant, hopefully not a lot more work, but more utilized as the tool, the communication, the assessment tool, and just sort of guiding the direction. So if you're saying, especially if you're new, hey, what do I do with a new resident? Take a look at that and you can see. By the way, Mike was in my class of 2010? What? Okay. So these are due, yeah, we do them the didactic year, so this is redundant, but then quarterly, so October, January, April, and July.